you to today's webinar, Rethinking the Back Office, Finance as a Strategic Enabler of Growth, brought to you on Proformative by Industry Dive with support from the sponsor of today's webinar, Topalti. My name is Megan Billingsley, and I'll be your MC for today. Before we dive in, I have a few housekeeping items to share with you. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you can use. All the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to get the most out of your desktop space. Please note the slides will advance automatically throughout the webinar. To enlarge the slides, click the Enlarge Slides button located in the top right-hand corner of your presentation window. A PDF of today's slides can be found under the Related Content tab. For those attendees seeking CPE credit today, you must answer at least 3 polling questions and remain on the line for the duration of the webinar. Credits are awarded in 24 hours. Afterwards, if you are eligible to receive credit, you will be able to click on an icon to download the certificate located in the certification section. If you have any questions on credits, please email cpe@proformative.com. We encourage you to submit questions at any time throughout the webinar using the Q&A widget. We will try to answer these during the webinar, but if a fuller answer is needed or if we run out of time, it will be answered later via email. Please know we do capture all questions. Finally, following the webinar, you will be able to access the on-demand recording of the webinar using the same link from today's live event. Now I'd like to introduce you to today's presenters. During our webinar, you'll hear from Mark Brousseau, President, Brousseau & Associates. Over the past 26 years, Mark has established himself as a thought leader on accounts payable, accounts receivable, payments, and document automation. A popular speaker at industry conferences and on webinars and podcasts, Mark advises prominent end users and solutions and services providers on how to use automation to improve document and payments-driven business processes. Mark has chaired numerous educational conferences and has served on several industry committees and boards. He resides in Center City, Philadelphia, with his wife and 3 sons. We also have with us Derek Chang, Senior Director, Corporate Marketing, Topalti. At Topalti, Derek leads the development of content and is the co-host of the Business Finance Friends podcast. He's authored multiple white papers and articles in the areas of finance operations and is an avid technologist for back-office processes spanning a career of over 25 years. It's now my pleasure to turn things over to Mark to cover our learning objectives for today. And after Mark takes us through the learning objectives, we'll launch our first poll of the day as a way to set a baseline for today's webinar. Welcome, Mark. Over to you.
Hey, thanks so much, Megan, and thank you all for joining us today. So chances are your business is ready to grow again. As economies start to reopen, business leaders are becoming more confident that they're going to be able to find ways to grow their revenues, increase their profits, and even gain a competitive edge. And against this backdrop, well, finance departments are going to need to up their game. Finance needs to be a strong partner to the business if it hopes to achieve its growth objectives. CFOs, well, they're already taking on strategic responsibility outside of finance and helping lead the charge. Now it's up to us. And let's face it, there's lots of levers that finance leaders can pull to help support growth. But to do that, well, we're going to have to eliminate all those manual, repetitive tasks that continue to consume so much of our time. During this webinar, we're going to show you how to do just that. We're going to discuss how finance is becoming a growth enabler in businesses of all sizes. We'll talk about the changing role of finance within the business. We'll discuss how repetitive manual tasks inhibit growth. We'll lay out the essential technologies for growth-minded finance departments, and we're going to leave you with an action plan for transforming your finance department into a growth engine. But before we do all that, well, we wanted to start with a poll question, which is now displayed on your screen. We want to know, which of the following is your finance department's top focus for improvement for the rest of 2021? Are you looking to improve your cash forecasting? Are you looking to improve your spend management? Are you looking for ways to mitigate risks, either payment fraud or compliance risks? or are you looking to improve your operational performance? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen. We'll discuss the results in just a moment. So, Derek, when you talk to CFOs, what's top of their mind and what they want to accomplish in their finance departments these days?
It's probably all of the above. They all relate back to operational performance. Certainly if they're growing and scaling, they would definitely want to optimize as much as they can. And all of these factors, all of these challenges really rely on getting that up-to-date information, up-to-date data, particularly reconcile it as much as they can. We have finance folks who reconcile on a weekly basis, which is incredible, and we see a lot of that happening more and more.
Are the days of finance being a scorekeeper, if you will, for the business over? Are we expected now for finance to be a strategist?
I think they want to be, and the fact that they have the information at hand makes them better equipped to help with those decisions. And certainly the more modeling you do around that, the better view you have of your future.
We asked our attendees, which of the following is your finance department's top improvement of 2021? 54% of our attendees said they are looking for ways to increase their operational performance. 28% of you said you want to improve your cash forecasting, likely make it easier and more accurate. 11% of you said you want tighter spend management, and 5% of you are looking for ways to mitigate your risk. 54% of our attendees, Derek, said they're looking for ways to improve their operational performance. In some ways, this might speak to the disruption caused by the shift to remote working. Are you seeing that organizations are still struggling to maintain peak performance in this remote work environment?
I know I am. I think everybody's dealing with remote work. That detachment from the office, from your team, it's still a bit of a hurdle, but with a lot more of these tools out there that remove some of those workflow friction, hopefully that's improving.
I suspect it might be tempting for some of the folks in the line to think, well, I've made it this far in this remote work environment. I guess we can just settle into this operational rhythm. What's the danger there in not looking for ways to optimize the way that your department's working these days in this new reality, if you will, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, that's not an answer to growth, though. I mean, if you are expanding, if you are creating new entities, if you're going cross-border, those are challenges that it still exists operationally. And so if you're only thinking, yes, in my little world, I'm done, that's cool. But if your CEOs, your shareholders are looking for more out of your company, then now is the time to then build up that ability to be more global.
After 16 months of cost cutting and other defensive measures, businesses of all sizes are ready to grow again. 88% of U.S. leaders expect an improvement in global economic growth over the next 12 months. That's according to a recent study by PricewaterhouseCoopers. And what might surprise you about that study is that half of U.S. finance leaders expect to expand their headcount over the next year so that they can capitalize on emerging opportunities for business growth. Now, there's lots of ways that businesses can grow, right? We can increase sales and marketing activities, create new product lines and business units, acquire and merge with other companies. We can even establish regional offices. I bet a lot of you are even looking at emerging and developed markets across the globe. And that's a great way to expand your markets and to smooth out dips in the sales cycle that you're likely to experience because of seasonal demand. It also gives you an opportunity to shore up your supply chain and access new talent and technologies. Whatever the approach your business has to growing, CFOs are playing a bigger role in making it all happen. CFOs are spending more time these days focused on things like finding and funding ways to drive long-term growth and transforming their finance function to scale, as Derek said, to meet growth demands. Let's face it, finance is critical to helping the business achieve its growth objectives. And more of you get this. More of you are adapting and adjusting your priorities to support these efforts. Make no mistake about it, the finance function is taking on a greater role within the business, a more strategic role. 47% of CFOs say that one of their top priorities is to establish finance as a partner to the business. What's interesting here is that tops hot button issues such as cost reduction, compliance, disclosures, and even reporting, things we tend to focus a lot on as finance leaders. Well, finance leaders see this. They see the opportunity here, and as Derek said, they're embracing it. More and more, I'm meeting finance leaders who say they're changing their role. They're helping the business become more agile through streamlined processes. They're freeing up cash for the business through working capital optimization. More on that later. They're aggregating and they're digitizing data so it's more accessible by stakeholders, not just in their department, but across the enterprise. And they're tracking and controlling data to mitigate risk. In short, finance is going well beyond traditional finance responsibilities, and they're helping the business grow. And that brings us to our next poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. This time we want to know, how would you describe your finance department's current level of automation? Would you say your finance department is fully automated, electronic, touch-free processing? Would you say you're largely automated? You've deployed some technology, but you still have some manual processes? Are you partially automated? You've deployed some technology, but you have lots of manual processes? Or would you say your finance department is still manual, paper-based? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen, and we'll discuss the results in just a moment. So how much progress have finance departments made, Derek, in automating their operations?
Well, every business is different, but we do see like there's more propensity now to want to be more holistic about how they automate. In other words, you're not solving for one pain point, you're solving for multiple points within that workflow, or rethinking what a workflow is. And so I think there's a consolidation now of a lot of those processing engines. And I think if you are scaling, that bodes well because that gives you an opportunity to bring in a tech stack that is much more cohesive and is designed to solve bigger problems versus what has become somewhat commoditized point solutions that are out there.
There's a temptation among smaller businesses to think they can wait until we grow, till we're bigger to automate. What's the fallacy in that thinking?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with nudge. So this is the ability for people to change and make decisions that improve their lives. One of the big challenges is you're stuck in something. You are not going to make that change, and so requiring small nudges to get you over the hump. Well, the longer you stay in that position and you build up that kind of inertia, you're not going to make that change. You'll barely feel the pain, but you won't realize that it is actually hurting your organization.
We asked our attendees, how would you describe your finance department's current level of automation? 64% of the attendees on the line say they're partially automated. They've deployed some technology, but they still have lots of manual processes. 16% of our attendees say they're largely automated. They've deployed some technology with a few manual processes. 8% of you are living the dream. You're fully automated. 10% of you are still pushing around lots of paper. I reckon that some folks might think that this is no time to be automating or investing in technology when the business is trying to hoard cash. What's wrong with that thinking, Derek?
Again, it's about growth. Do you want to grow it's not, you don't plan for this point in time. This point in time is happening. You're planning for your next year and 2 years from now. What is your organization going to look like? How deep into these processes do you want to be? And how do you want to get better? And so if finance is about setting a standard for the rest of the organization in terms of optimization, then it seems like finance should be also leading on the operational side for their own processes.
Yeah, and if you want to set that standard, you're going to need to eliminate those manual processes. The finance staff in most businesses spend their days inundated with manual, repetitive tasks, things like keying invoice data and shuffling paper and chasing down information, fixing errors, mistakes, and responding to phone calls and emails from suppliers and stakeholders about where things stand in the process. And when our staff is mired in all these high-frequency manual tasks, well, they don't have a whole lot of time left for growth-generating activities, the things that help build the business, things like analyzing data and collaborating with stakeholders and building relationships with your key suppliers. And this is really insidious because there's lots of ways that manual tasks drain our team's time. And one of the biggest time wasters in many finance departments is responding to all those calls and all those emails from suppliers and stakeholders about where things stand in the process. It's not uncommon for 1/4 of an entire finance professional's day to be spent providing updates to suppliers and stakeholders and fixing mistakes and chasing down that information. It costs $3.60 on average to respond to just one email or phone call from one supplier or stakeholder. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Mark, $3.60 isn't a whole lot of money. But think about all the calls and all the emails that your finance team takes each month from suppliers and stakeholders. Now we're talking about big money. And the thing is, it's harder these days to track down that information, to respond to those inquiries when our teams are working from home. And as sobering as that number is, it's just one example of how manual tasks can suck away our time and money. And you know what? The complexity becomes even more overwhelming, even more costly when our business layers on cross-border payments or we expand into new markets. Now when we have inefficient processes, well, that's going to leave us two choices, right? Add staff to contend with all that volume and all that complexity, or on the other hand, limit the markets we're entering so that we can avoid that. Well, neither of those is palatable in this economy. And when we think about it, the root of all these inefficiencies goes back to the way we're managing our processes, those standards that Derek was talking about. Most finance departments today rely on a hodgepodge of point solutions and closed-loop networks for tasks such as supplier onboarding and invoice management and making payments to suppliers. And each of these systems, they have their own logins and passwords, their own user authentication, their own file formats, their own proprietary integrations. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means that you're going to inevitably end up with data silos and payment silos and missed handoffs. And in most cases, well, key data is not going to be captured. Information is going to be poorly organized. Data is not going to be timely. Systems are going to be fragmented. And important for today's discussion, decision makers simply aren't going to have the information they need to make strategic decisions to drive growth. And all of this is especially true when it comes to how we pay our suppliers. Our AP staff must manually enter invoice information, call, email, or fax payees to verify legal entities. They got to print and email checks. They got to log into multiple bank portals to schedule multiple electronic payments. A lot of times, well, you're going to have multi-level approvals that are going to cause delays. And in a lot of cases, you're not going to be able to collect all the tax forms you need. So we're going to have this mad dash at the end of the year. And if you're doing business globally, well, it only gets more complicated. Cross-border payments, regulatory issues, and tax compliance and currency conversion. The list goes on and on. So as a result, well, staff waste lots and lots of time on activities that can be automated or eliminate it altogether. And if you want a sense of just how much time we're talking about here, consider this. Only 7% of all finance departments describe themselves as being fully automated. That's in line with our poll question today. So like the rest of the attendees on the call today, most finance departments rely on this mess of manual and semi-automated processes. So as one example, 47% of finance teams spend 5 to 10 people hours per week on tasks such as AP processing. Now, based on data from the U.S. Department of Commerce, that means that the typical business is wasting somewhere between $15,000 and $30,000 per year per FTE on manual tasks. That's a big number when we start adding up our staff. And the thing is that the bigger you are, the more time and the more money those manual tasks are going to cost you. Now, if you're already a growing company, you're going to start to feel that pain sooner. Things only get more complicated as you grow. Consider the situation if you're a multi-entity company. Businesses with multiple entities, they're going to have many different systems to integrate, complex processes to try and navigate and manage, and they're going to have far-flung finance teams working in each of those entities. So now think about all the time and effort just to pay your suppliers in each of these entities when you're operating in this kind of an environment. Long before you ever get to making the payment, you've got to find ways to collect and validate and track banking information and tax forms from all of your suppliers for all of your entities, no matter where they are. Think about all the time and money it's going to cost you to make payments in local currency. You're going to have to log into multiple bank portals. You're going to have to manage those multiple banking relationships, reconcile all those banking statements. You're going to have to pay all those banking fees. And then on the back end of this all, you've got to find a way to roll up all that data back to HQ. And a lot of companies don't even have complete integration from each of their entities to the HQ. So what are we doing? Well, now we're going to start generating reports manually, and that's going to cost more time and more money. And if that's not bad enough, well, now we're going to start layering in all of the issues around tax compliance. For the global companies on the phone, you know that this burden is ever increasing. We all know that FATCA requires that U.S. entities validate all international payees. But when we manually do that process, it really can be tricky. It also can be time consuming. And it also can be a burden getting your payees to update their tax details. So you've got to understand their business structures, their corporate officers, and their address changes. And in many cases, that again is a manual process. And if you don't do it right, well, now you're going to face some pretty big onboarding risks. Everything from IRS fines and wasted time to upsetting your suppliers and maybe even resulting in goods and services not getting delivered. And that brings us to our next poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. This time we want to know, which of the following tools and technologies has your finance department already deployed? Check all that apply. Have you already deployed a supplier onboarding and registration solution? Have you already deployed a solution for invoice management? Have you deployed technology for global payments? Have you deployed a solution for tax and regulatory compliance? Or have you deployed none of the above? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed at your screen. And we'll discuss the results in just a moment. One of the things that attendees might be wondering, Derek, is how hard is it to deploy technologies at a time when finance teams are working remotely and IT resources are stretched thin? Is it still as hard as it was back in the day?
Definitely not. I would say we see quite a bit of adoption, even today, especially today, because we're trying to solve for the physical parts of AP with a more digital solution. It's actually easier to deploy. Everything's in the cloud. If you have a cloud-based ERP, that interface is fairly clean as well. So it's actually easier now to do. And certainly we have customers who are fully remote, have always been fully remote. And again, for them, it's not a big deal. I think challenges will be around getting supplier adoption, getting them onboarded properly. That's always been a challenge. It's like herding cats sometimes. I'm sure a lot of folks understand that. And then, but internally, I think it's easier now than ever.
We asked our attendees, which of the following tools and technologies is your finance department already deployed? 55% of our attendees on the line have a solution for invoice management. 35% of our attendees say they have technology to help them with tax and regulatory compliance. 17% of our attendees, well, they have technology for supplier onboarding and making payments globally. What stands out to you when you look at these results, Derek?
I think what stands out to me is what stands out usually, which is a cohesion of all these things. There are gaps between onboarding and invoice management and payments and regulatory. So if you can try and eliminate those gaps as best as you can, turn two processes, three processes into one process, that's where you're actually scalable.
29% of our attendees haven't deployed any of the technologies in this poll question. What advice would you give to an organization that's still completely manual and paper-based? This all might seem overwhelming, Derek. How do they get started?
I think most companies will map out their process, get a lay of the land, if you will, and we can actually help assess that if you need that kind of support. And then really see what the impact of what they're doing is having, if they're feeling pain. If you are not feeling pain and you haven't deployed any technology, that's fairly unusual. Maybe you don't recognize what pain is in that situation, and therefore you're not going to take action.
I think we've established that finance can play a big role in helping drive business growth. And many CFOs know that they can no longer afford to have all these manual finance processes stand in the way of their growth. In fact, PricewaterhouseCoopers finds that 77% of CFOs are prioritizing operational efficiency right after growing the business. 43% of CFOs, well, they plan to increase investments in digital transformation by double digits in the next year. That's right. Digital transformation efforts have accelerated during the economic recession. Now, while it might be clear what we need to do, the question that might not be as obvious is, how do we do it? Now, to help your finance department along its way, we've put together 6 steps to becoming a growth-driven finance department. If you use these strategies, they will help ensure that your finance department can become a good partner to your business in driving its growth, regardless of its size or where it stands. The first step to becoming a better partner for driving growth is to think touchless. Now, I know what you're thinking. Touchless processing might seem a little far-fetched if you're one of our attendees who's operating in a manual, paper-based environment, or if you've got all those challenges that we identified in our earlier poll question. But efficient and effective workflows and business models, well, they're going to be critical for growth. So it's got to be key that you take out as many of those manual processes as possible. And this is especially true for those mid-market businesses that don't have the luxury of dealing with growth by staffing up or leveraging big shared services center, right? So the question is how do we do this, Mark? How do we achieve touchless processing? Well, it all starts with supplier management. A lot of you are relying on phone calls and paper forms and emails to onboard and register your suppliers. And so the result, well, you're going to have long, costly, and risky processes. When you have an on-demand self-service portal, that can offer you a better approach. That type of technology helps you accelerate supplier onboarding. So now you're able to put the onus on suppliers to provide their own information. You're not chasing them down. So they key in their contact details, they upload their documents, they provide the information you need to validate them, verify them, register them, and of course, make sure that they are payable. Now, next you want to make it easier for your AP department to manage and reconcile their invoices. Now, I know 55% of you said you have some type of invoice management technology, but I'd hazard a guess that the technology probably wasn't built to aggregate all of your invoices onto a single platform. And in many cases, those piecemeal solutions, well, they might be creating more problems than they're solving. What you want to do is you want to find a way to convert paper invoices into electronic format. Now, I know that you're receiving more invoices via email these days, probably as a PDF email attachment. You probably are still getting some paper invoices. What you want to do is find technology that can aggregate all of those invoices onto a single platform. Then use things like optical character recognition technology, OCR for short, to automatically extract the data from the invoice so you don't have to go ahead and key it. Now, once you've got all these invoices onto one platform, no more standalone solutions, now you can go ahead and you can standardize and normalize your processing of the invoices. Now we're cooking with gas, right? Data is going to be captured and validated automatically. Your invoices are matched up against POs and shipping documents in your ERP if you're using those. Unmatched invoices or even invoices that require review, such as high dollar invoices or invoices for strategic suppliers. They can be digitally routed to the right person based on rules that you set up in advance. Data on approved invoices, well, now that's going to be automatically uploaded into your ERP or accounting system without anyone ever having to key it. And all of this is going to be tracked and reconciled in real time. Now, when you do this, when you have this approach to invoice management, now you're going to have fewer manual tasks. You also want to find better ways to manage your tax and regulatory compliance. It was the second biggest technology deployed by our group today. And for those of you who haven't started to automate, this might be a big pain in your organization. We've all been there, right? We've got the end of the year scramble to gather up the appropriate tax documents from suppliers. We've got the regulations that are hard to keep track of on the fly. This can be a real burden, particularly as you grow. So what you want to do is you want to find tools that help you automate this process. You want to find ways to gather the right tax form and the right tax information from suppliers on the front end, long before they ever get paid. And you want to make sure that it puts the onus on them to supply this information so you're not chasing them down anymore. You also want to make sure you have tools to ensure that payees provide the correct information. You want to validate the forms, and you want to validate the information for accuracy and for completeness. And you even want to have tools that can help you calculate tax withholding so your finance team can get out of the business of doing that. Now, the fourth way to achieve touchless finance processing is to automate the way your department operates globally. We know that when you have global suppliers, it increases complexity. Now you're going to have cross-border payments. Now you're going to have more tax and regulatory compliance issues. You're going to have more reporting to deal with, more languages, more currencies. So what you want to do is you want to find solutions that allow you to automate this process, one that can handle cross-border payments in multiple currencies and with multiple payment types, and provide you with the tax reporting and regulatory compliance you need. Now, if you're relying on a series of banks across multiple countries to do this for you, you do have a better option. The second step to achieving better financial processes is to eliminate that friction. So once you've reduced friction in your processes, well, now you're going to be able to have staff intervene only when necessary, only when there's a true exception. And in an automated environment, that means that you're going to have the decision-making taken out of the hands of staff. Technology is going to ensure chain of custody and direct your workflows and enforce separation of duties and manage your document and data retention. This is all going to be done automatically without anyone having to worry about it or think about it, if you will. PricewaterhouseCoopers finds that 48% of businesses are changing processes to become less dependent on institutional knowledge. This so-called desk-level decision-making, what we want to have is we want to have automated processes that operate in a continuous process improvement loop. And that's really what automation does for you here. When you have less time required for manual repetitive tasks, well, now your staff's going to have more time to focus on things that grow the business. How much time are we talking about here? Well, more than half of CFOs say that their organization has eliminated at least 40% of its manual processing by automating. And in most cases, this resulted in reallocating, not eliminating staff. And don't give short shrift to the other benefits on this chart. It's no coincidence to me that once a business is automated, that it's able to improve the experience it provides, reduce its risks, and even enhance its visibility. These all go hand in hand. The second way to help drive growth from your finance department is to establish an early payment program. Now, high growth businesses need to find ways to free up cash to invest back in the business, right? We need that fuel. But many of us are maintaining our cash flow by doing what? Extending payment terms. What we want to do is that we want to find ways to do this in a way that frees up cash and is fair to our suppliers. When we stretch payment terms out to 60 or 90 days, that could have a trickle-down effect. And not every CFO wants to use their cash from their balance sheet to offer early payments to suppliers in exchange for those stretched out payment terms. So there's a better approach here, and that is to integrate early payment offers into your payables workflow. This eliminates that ad hoc negotiation of terms that some of you might be doing, and it does it by allowing you to offer early payments with just 2 or 3 click agreement process with your suppliers. When you have this type of program, suppliers can be paid as soon as your payables are approved. They just have to give up a small percentage discount. And you can make payments according to your invoice due date. So it's a win-win. In this environment, you're going to have suppliers get paid fast, they'll have easy access to working capital, and they'll have it all at a reasonable rate. They can be paid as early as, well, today, and they can choose when to accept their early payments. Buyers can use early payment programs to strengthen their supplier relationships. You're probably getting calls from more suppliers asking you about early payment, particularly small and mid-sized suppliers who might not have big lines of credit that they can draw upon. So you're going to be able to pay these suppliers early without impacting the cash on your balance sheet. And in some cases, they can help you push out terms during contract negotiations. Again, it's a win-win. Third step to turning your finance department into a growth engine for the business is to achieve real-time visibility, tightly managing cash flow and corporate spending. Well, that's key when you're a high-growth business. You need to have consolidated visibility into what's going on with your finances. When you have an automated solution, that's going to help you get the smart insights into the fingertips of the people who need them. You're going to want to have a solution that uses things like graphical dashboards, drill down capabilities into the root cause of trends, ad hoc reporting, so you can manipulate or query data on the fly, mobile access to data, so on-the-go senior managers can see what's going on in finance. When you have tools like this, now you're going to be able to better manage your forecasting, your budgeting, your planning. You're going to be able to better analyze your cash, identify anomalous transactions more quickly, and even improve collaboration with stakeholders in other parts of the business so that you can better develop strategies. The fourth step to transforming finance into a growth engine is to automate reconciliation. We all know that slow and ineffective reconciliation process, well, they make it hard for us to forecast our cash. Today, I hear from finance leaders that cash forecasting is harder and it's less accurate than ever. It's harder for us to lay our hands on that information. So what you want to do is you want to find technology that simplifies the reconciliation of payments made across your subsidiaries. And this eliminates the need to correlate all those individual balance sheets that many of us have to do. So when you have a solution like this, now your data is going to be fed into reporting sources, and that's going to allow the data to be normalized for currency considerations. And this is going to allow you to get real-time visibility into what's going on, no matter where those subsidiaries are located. The fifth step to transforming finance into a growth engine is to improve your tracking and your control. This is critical for a fast-growing business, particularly one with multiple entities. So you want to find a solution that can help protect against audit failures. And there's a few things that you ought to consider when you're evaluating technologies to do that. The first is, does it use optical character recognition technology? Can you be sure that all of the information that your auditors are going to want to see is going to be collected and stored? So you want to make sure that you're digitizing all of your documents and you're extracting all of the data from them. You also want to look for technologies that have configurable approval routing. Auditors want to be sure that you have a way to enforce your policies and procedures for approvals. You don't want the same person submitting an invoice and approving it for payment. You also want to make sure that you have a technology that integrates with your supplier management systems so that there's less chance that you're going to be paying a supplier that isn't payable. And these are just some of the things that you want to look for to help you improve tracking and control. When you do this, these are scalable capabilities that will make life easier as your business grows. Our sixth and final step to becoming a growth-driven finance department is to streamline tax compliance. Fast-growing businesses don't have the time to chase down payees for tax information at the end of the year. So what you want to do is you want to find a way to integrate tax identity collection and verification into your supplier onboarding process. You want to make this as automated as possible. You want to make it easy for suppliers to submit their W-9s and W-8s and VAT details in a way that you can track and control. You also want to have built-in requests and reminders to suppliers to update their tax details so that we're not always on phones and emails chasing them to do it. And you want to make sure you have controlled workflows so that administrators can always see what's going on. And let's face it, this is impossible in an environment where we're relying on emails to onboard our suppliers. Hopefully you see that automation plays a big role in transforming our finance department into a growth engine. The thing you might be wondering is, all right, so what are the key takeaways? What are the key considerations when I'm looking at technology to automate my processes? Well, the first is you want to look for a solution that's as automated as possible. You don't want piecemeal approach to automating your financial operations. Second, you want to make sure that whatever technologies you deploy in your finance tech stack are accessible. There's no end in sight to remote working. It's here to stay. So we want to make sure that workers frontline staff, decision makers, and even suppliers can access the information they need when, where, and how they need it. And with that, we want to make sure that we're using 100% cloud-based technology that can scale with our operations. And we want to make sure that the tech stack we're deploying has built-in governance controls so that we can automatically enforce separation of duties, ensure chain of custody, log all actions taken on a transaction, encrypt data so that we can be sure it's secured. It can have automated data retention and document retention so that things can't become deleted prematurely. We also want to make sure that our tech stack provider offers training that allows us to get our team up to speed as fast as possible, no matter where they work. And finally, you want to make sure that the tech stack you're evaluating is as scalable as possible. The goal is to grow our business. So we want to make sure that we deploy foundational technology that will grow with it. These aren't throwaway solutions we should be looking at. Look for something that has scalability built in. And in many cases, that starts with the cloud. You also want to make sure you assess your needs. Derek spoke of this earlier. You want to consider where you are with your business maturity today and where you're going. What are your key strategic priorities and how do they fit into the needs of your finance department? You want to make sure you understand the complexity of your organization and your business model. Do you have multiple entities today? What are your short and long-term goals and how do they factor into the key features that you'll need in the solution? How is your organization's going to expand globally over time? Does this technology you're looking at offer support for multiple languages and multiple currencies? How many international suppliers do you have today? How are they being onboarded? And how are they being validated for tax compliance? And most importantly, what are your current challenges you're trying to solve for? I want you to survey your frontline staff as well as key stakeholders to understand where it is your finance processes currently fall short. Where are all those manual processes that drain their time and their energy? If you assess your needs in this manner, it'll give you a blueprint for choosing the right tech stack for automating your finance department and turning it into a growth engine for your business. And once you've done that, now you're going to be able to provide your CFO and your business leaders with the tools they need to help drive the business forward. And that brings us to our final poll question, which is about to be displayed on your screen. This time we want to know, which of the following do you believe is the biggest benefit of automating your financial operations? Is it cash flow optimization? Is it better spend management? Is it mitigating the risk of payment fraud and compliance violations? Is it improving your operational efficiency? Or is it all of the above? Take a moment to respond to the poll question now displayed on your screen. And we'll discuss the results in just a moment. Derek, let's talk for a moment about optimizing our cash flow. One of the key tenets of our discussion today is that businesses will need to free up cash to help drive their growth. How does automation help them do that?
Am I muted? Oh, sorry. It's certainly a challenging time right now. Being able to map out how you're going to how money is coming in and how you optimize that. Certainly, when you want to negotiate better with your suppliers, you need to know what you have on hand. Forecasting right now is just challenging. So the more data you have about how you're spending, that will only help fuel that.
We asked our attendees, which of the following do you believe is the biggest benefit of automating your financial operations? 22% of our attendees identified improved operational efficiency as the single biggest benefit. 9% of them said it was cash flow optimization. 3% said better spend management. But look at this. 2/3 of you say it's all of the above. Well, if you're trying to achieve those benefits, automation is going to be key. And to talk about one potential solution for automating your financial operations, I'm going to hand it off to Derek. Derek?
Thanks, Mark, and thank you to the performative community. If you don't already know who Topalti is, I'm excited to introduce us to you. If you have heard of us, I hope I'll keep this interesting. I really do love telling our story. We provide payables automation for over 1,500 companies. It's been growing 80% a year. You probably recognize some of these logos. For example, if you have kids, you've probably heard of Roblox. We actually pay every game developer on that platform. If you're getting married, you might have heard of Zola, which is they provide an e-commerce site for people who are looking to get married and planning their weddings. They actually process tens of thousands of invoices a month through their system. And I believe they have 2 people on their team just doing that. So that's a lot of volume. It's interesting to see that. When you hear WordPress, you might not know that the company behind 70% of the world's websites is actually called Automatic, and we actually help them with their global AP. We're really proud of our 98% customer retention rate, particularly for a SaaS company. It's pretty unheard of. And I bring that up because this is a process that is about reliability and trust. These are not major enterprises with unending amounts of resources, but they are fast-growing companies. They're looking to scale. I think in the last 12 months, a dozen or so customers of ours actually went public or filed their S1s, or they were acquired. So we're really proud of being able to be the choice for these businesses as they execute their payables processes. I won't go into all the details of what we do. We're happy to schedule demos with you to go over it and see what might fit your needs. But I will say that we have a few points of secret sauce, and one starts with supplier management, being able to capture a lot of that supplier data early so that they can get paid and alleviate your team from doing that. That's a big value proposition for us. And we actually have services that help you get your suppliers onboarded as well. So we want to reduce the unnecessary friction that comes along with just getting someone payable. And then we recently added procurement as part of our process, the ability to create POs on the fly, connect it to your ERP, and use those POs eventually to match back to invoices. We, of course, have invoice processing. And then in terms of global remittance, this is another big benefit, is the ability to pay to 196 countries, 120 currencies. We used 6 different payment methods, including SEPA payments or global ACH, which really reduce the cost of wires and the need for paper checks. And so that's really a nice benefit for Topalti. We do all this at scale, and it's a very robust architecture. We think of it as paperless, frictionless, checkless, stress-free. There are a lot of customers of ours, very sizable ones, that consider payables a part-time function. So they may be paying thousands of suppliers, but they don't have one dedicated headcount for that. That headcount is used for other areas in the finance department. So very, very excited to talk with you about that. And then I wanted to add that we actually have our first user conference coming up. So if you go to topalti.com/illuminate on October 13th and 14th, it's all online. We have a 2-day conference. We've got some featured speakers, including Venus Williams. And if you are a true crime fan, Robert Mazier is an undercover agent who busted the cartels in Mexico, the drug cartels. And so he'll be telling some stories there. We had to black him out because no one should know his identity. But cool stuff happening there. Lots of thought leadership, lots of product previews and things like that. So we're hoping to get folks excited. This is going to be an annual thing. This is our first and hopefully last virtual conference. We want to be in person next year. So yeah, definitely come and check us out. And I will hand it back over to you, Mark.
That's what's on our minds. Now let's find out what's on your minds. We're going to enter the Q&A portion of this webinar. If you haven't already submitted your question for Derek and I, go ahead and do that now. Or if you've thought of another question, do that as well. Megan, I understand we have some questions from attendees.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you, Mark and Derek, for an excellent session today. So yes, as Mark said, you can use that Q&A widget to submit your questions. And if we don't get to it directly during this webinar, we will be sure to follow up post-event. So kicking off our first question, it says, thanks for outlining how CFOs drive growth. Can you both comment on how you saw the role of the CFO change during the pandemic? And how do you think it will continue to evolve as we move to 2022?
That's a great question. Certainly, CFOs are being called to do more. We actually just published a study on that, where I think it was 99% of CFOs say they are doing more, and things that were beyond their job description earlier. They're called in to do more of the operational side of the business, more planning, more foresight into how to become sustainable. It's an odd place to put a CFO, but I think that they are well equipped to do that, to handle that, because they can look at the kind of the map of the organization and really identify places where companies can improve. They become almost more chief optimization officers.
That's a good line. I'm stealing that one. That's exactly right, Derek. And I think over time, we're going to see more of an evolution of CFOs into that strategic role, right? They're working more closely with the CEO and the board in many cases to develop those strategies. And that's why you're seeing them take an active role, not only in growth strategies, but also they're leading the digital transformation efforts in most businesses. So I think you're going to see that continue, Megan, over time.
Which makes it even more important to reduce some of that manual process effort, because you don't want to be locked into handling all of these daily functions when you really need to be thinking big picture.
That's right.
Thank you both. Our next question says, it feels like we've been talking about the risks of manual processes for years. Why do you think many organizations still rely on them?
Yeah, so not everybody's automating.
Yeah, it goes back to that nudge factor. I think, it's the frog in the, no, that's not a good picture. It's the lobster in the water. You slowly turn up the heat on the lobster and they don't realize they're being boiled alive. That inability to recognize your own pain and we've done this for years the way we've been doing it, and not realizing that there is actually more out there. There are opportunities out there to expand and grow and, get out of some of that minutia work and focus more on, the things that actually can drive value and improve the business.
It's easy, Megan, to get distracted with our day-to-day responsibilities, right? There's always something going on. Life comes at us fast these days. The thing is that finance leaders can't afford to be distracted when it comes to automating their operations, right? We can't let this go anymore. So I think that's going to be the big pressure in the next couple quarters, is finance leaders need to develop a strategy to get rid of as many of these manual processes as possible, or else they're going to put their business at a big competitive disadvantage to their peers.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm going to try to squeeze in one more question here. As a follow-up, do you have any suggestions on how to get buy-in or overcome some of the barriers to automation?
I think demonstrating the right ROI, having a strong understanding of where the gaps are in your process, and then mapping it out in terms of how much time are we spending on this? It's the classic finance argument. If it's worth doing, then they will sign off on it. especially if you map it out, not for now, present day you cannot plan for. It is about the future and mapping it out for 12 months, 24 months from now. What does that look like?
Yeah, and for goodness sake, put your proposal in terms that the senior management will care about and things that keep them up at night, right? Managing cash, managing liquidity, mitigating risk.
And for fast-growing companies, it's about how am I opening up capacity to do other things?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Thank you both. That is all the time that we have today for questions. If we were not able to answer your question, please know that we do capture all submitted questions, and someone from the team will follow up in the coming days. Before we close out, we'd like to thank Topalti again for making today's webinar possible. We'd also like to thank Mark and Derek once again for a fantastic session. We appreciate you sharing your experience and insights with us. Their contact information is on our next and final slide. In addition to Mark and Derek, we'd also like to thank our attendees for joining us today for Rethinking the Back Office, Finance as a Strategic Enabler of Growth, brought to you on Proformative by Industry Dive. Today's webinar will be available on demand if you want to review any of the content that was discussed today. Finally, we invite you to complete our online feedback survey that will appear in a separate browser window. We appreciate your feedback. Once again, thanks again for joining us. We hope that you enjoy the rest of your day.